Welcome to Fluent Story Time, where stories don't just teach you English, they teach you life. Today, I want to tell you the story of two brothers who gave wings to humanity. This is not a movie, not a fairy tale. It's a true story of two ordinary men who turned the impossible into reality. The story of Wilbur and Orville Wright. They didn't come from a rich family. They had no degrees, no investors, no fame. But they had something far more powerful, belief. A belief that one day, humans would fly like birds. Let's go back to the late 1800s. Wilbur Wright was born in 1867, and 4 years later, his brother Orville came into the world. They grew up in a simple home in America. Their father was a bishop, their mother a creative homemaker who loved building things with her hands. Their childhood was not filled with toys or luxury, but it was filled with curiosity. The brothers loved exploring, asking questions, and trying to understand how things worked. One day, their father brought home a small toy helicopter made of bamboo, cork, and rubber bands. When the boys wound it up and let it go, it flew up into the air and spun beautifully before landing. The moment was magical. For most children, that toy would just be fun for a few minutes. But for Wilbur and Orville, it became a lifelong memory. They broke it apart to see how it worked, rebuilt it, and wondered, what if we could make a big one? What if a man could fly? That single question became their purpose. As they grew up, life was not easy. They didn't have money for college, but they had something better: curiosity and determination. They read every book they could find about science, mechanics, and flight. As teenagers, they built their own printing press and started a small business printing newspapers. Later, they opened a bicycle repair shop in Dayton, Ohio. It may sound ordinary, but that little shop was where the dream of flight truly took shape. Bicycles taught them balance, motion, and control. Three things that later became the foundation of flying. They spent hours fixing bikes, experimenting with gears, testing speed and stability. And when the shop was quiet, they talked about flight. They studied birds, observing how they moved their wings to turn or rise. Wilbur once said, "Birds don't just flap. They control the air." That idea changed everything. By the late 1890s, the Wright brothers had started building gliders. They learned about a German inventor, Otto Lilienthal, who built gliders and died testing them. Instead of feeling afraid, they were inspired. They decided to continue what he started, to finish his dream. In 1900, they built their first real glider and traveled to a remote, windy place called Kitty Hawk in North Carolina. The sand dunes there were perfect for testing flight. They built their gliders with wood and cloth, lived in tents, and cooked their own meals. They tested hundreds of designs, often crashing, often failing. But they never stopped. When one glider broke, they built another. When the wind didn't cooperate, they waited. When results disappointed them, they studied the reasons and improved. By 1903, after more than 700 flights, they had learned how to control a glider in the air, the biggest challenge in flight. Now they needed one more thing: power. They tried to buy a lightweight engine, but none existed. So they decided to build one themselves. With the help of their mechanic Charlie Taylor, they designed and built a 12-horsepower aluminum engine, light but strong. They also reinvented the propeller. Everyone thought a propeller was like a boat paddle, but the brothers said, "No, it's a rotating wing." They tested hundreds of shapes and discovered one that worked perfectly. At last, their flying machine was ready. They called it the Wright Flyer. It was made of wood and fabric, 40 feet wide and weighing over 600 pounds. On December 17, 1903, the brothers prepared for their first powered flight. The wind was cold and strong. They flipped a coin to decide who would go first. Orville won. Wilbur held the side of the machine while Orville lay flat on the wing, controlling the engine. The propeller started. The plane began to move along a wooden rail. And then, for the first time in human history, a machine carrying a man lifted off the ground and stayed in the air. It flew only 12 seconds and covered 120 feet, but it was enough to change the world forever. They made 3 more flights that day. The longest lasted 59 seconds and covered 852 feet. No reporters were there. No crowd watched. Just two brothers smiling in the freezing wind, realizing they had just done something no human had ever done before. You'd think the world would celebrate them, but nobody believed them. When they wrote to newspapers, they were ignored. Scientists laughed. Two bicycle mechanics claim they can fly? They said. But the brothers didn't argue. They didn't chase fame. They said quietly, "We'll fly again. The world will see." And they did. They improved their planes, one version after another, Flyer 2, Flyer 3, each better than before. By 1905, they could fly for 38 minutes, turn in circles, and land safely. They had built the first real airplane. Yet, the world still refused to believe. Then, in 1908, Wilbur traveled to France to demonstrate their invention. People there laughed at him at first. "This American farmer says he can fly?" But when Wilbur took off, silence fell over the crowd. He flew gracefully, turned smoothly, circled, and landed perfectly. The crowd erupted in applause. The world finally believed. Overnight, Wilbur became a hero. European kings and scientists came to meet him. Soon after, Orville gave his own demonstrations in America for the U.S. Army. He flew for over an hour, carried passengers, and proved the machine's stability. But during one flight, tragedy struck. A propeller broke midair. The plane crashed. Orville was seriously injured, and his passenger, Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, became the first person in history to die in an airplane crash. It was a painful moment for the brothers, but they didn't stop. They continued their mission, to make flight safer and better for everyone. By 1909, the world celebrated them. They signed contracts with the U.S. Army and European governments. They opened schools to train new pilots. Their dream had finally come true, but success came with a cost. Wilbur spent the last years of his life fighting legal battles against people who copied their designs. He spent less time flying and more time in courtrooms. Years of stress weakened his health. In 1912, Wilbur Wright died at only 45 years old. Orville was heartbroken. He continued their work for decades, promoting aviation safety and innovation. He saw airplanes become faster, larger, and even used in wars. Once, he sadly said, "I wish we had invented something more peaceful." Still, he lived to see airplanes cross oceans, connect cities, and bring the world closer than ever before. In 1948, Orville Wright passed away at the age of 76. But their dream didn't die. Every airplane, every pilot, every flight in the sky is a continuation of their dream. They didn't just build a machine. They built a future. Because of them, you can fly across continents in hours. Because of them, rockets reach the stars. Because of them, the sky is no longer the limit. Their story is not just about invention. It's about faith, courage, and persistence. The Wright brothers taught the world 5 timeless lessons. First, you don't need permission to start. They had no money or degrees, only passion and curiosity. Second, failure is not the end. Every crash was a step closer to success. Third, let your work speak. They didn't argue with the world. They proved themselves through results. Fourth, believe when no one else does. The world laughed at them until the world learned from them. And fifth, protect your dream, but don't lose your peace. Wilbur fought too hard and lost his health, but his dream lives on forever. Every time an airplane rises into the sky, every time a rocket leaves the earth, their spirit lives again. 2 brothers from a small bicycle shop taught humanity to fly. Their courage shows that dreams are built not by luck, but by belief. Belief so strong that it refuses to fall. So if you have a dream, start where you are. Build with what you have. Fail, learn, and rise again. Even if nobody believes in you, keep believing in yourself, because one day the world will fly because of your dream. Thank you for watching Fluent Storytime, where stories don't just teach you English, they teach you life. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, every great dream begins with a small flight of belief.